Hello and welcome back to the podcast. How exciting to be back after our very busy Gifted, Talented and Neurodiversity Awareness Week a couple of weeks ago, where we did 5 podcasts in 5 days. It was all a little crazy and it was a lot of fun and a hugely successful week. So congratulations to the G Word team and Mark Smolowitz, who just brought everyone together for a truly global experience. And I'm really looking forward to what we can get up to in GTN Awareness Week next year. So hold on tight for that one. But this week, we're back with someone who has become a regular here, and I'm very happy to say, the lovely Dr. Matt Zakreski, full of such wisdom and knowledge and insight. And it's always a delight to catch up with him. In this episode, I think Dr. Matt was a little sleep deprived with his busy children. I was also just, a bit, getting by in life. So it's a particularly fun episode, I think. And it's all about imposter syndrome. Definitely something that I am working on in a big way. And I know a lot of people who are. I was actually surprised to interview Denise Yates during GTN Awareness Week, who is like, oh my God, just one of the most amazing people in the gifted world. And she admitted to imposter syndrome. So it's out there. Everyone's feeling this. And I'm not even talking about the kids. This is just the grown-ups. So I found this a hugely helpful episode. It was almost like 30 minutes of my own therapy. Thanks, Dr. Matt. But I really hope that this is going to help you as well. Dr. Matt has also been so gracious to share with us his slides on imposter syndrome, and they're really good. There's a lot of extra information in there. So if you want to dive a bit deeper after this episode, check out the show notes, which will have a link to our website. And on Dr. Matt's page on imposter syndrome, you can find a way to access the slides and download them there. So I will include all those links in the show notes, so it's nice and far easier than I just made it sound. So thanks for joining us. Oh, I also have to say, just as almost a side note, just this little thing, our Gifted Kids podcast, just over a year old and almost 21,000 downloads. And I just want to thank everyone for such an amazing year. It's been big. It's been huge. And I just feel incredibly humble and grateful to everyone who listens and sends messages and lets me know that it is helping, because that, makes me want to do more. And how amazing is that? Almost, I just checked, it's like so close to 21,000 downloads. And I just think that's incredible. So thank you so much. And that's enough from me. Let's listen to the podcast. And thanks, Dr. Matt, for joining us again and sharing those resources. It's totally awesome. All right, folks, talk to you soon. Bye. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted. Because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I've felt like that parent, then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Matt. Thank you for joining us.
So happy to be here.
Excellent. We're always happy to have you and look forward to these chats and your insights for us into the gifted world. And today I'm actually super excited to be talking about imposter syndrome because, darn, that sucks. Right?
Oh, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst.
Yeah, it really is. And so I think at some point, one of my questions will be, do kids get it too? Because I certainly know adults do.
Yep.
But let's start off, first of all, with what is imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where a person consistently doubts their accomplishments and has this fear of being exposed as a fraud. Now, you've got to have both things for it to be true imposter syndrome, right? Because we all have self-doubt sometimes, right? Like, am I doing a good job answering the questions on this podcast, right? That's a self-doubt that's happening right now, right? But if you have that, plus you're worried that the imaginary imposter police are going to kick open the door to your house and drag you out of there, like, we finally caught you, that's true imposter syndrome. This idea of being able to not internalize and own the successes you have because you have found some reason that they don't matter.
And so it sounds like there's a real sense of kind of fear or anxiety associated to potentially being found out as a fraud. Yeah. And so why is it particularly relevant in the gifted context?
So the research on imposter syndrome has consistently identified that people who are made to feel or feel different, right? So those three things, they are different, they are made to feel different, or they feel different, are much more likely to feel like imposters. And so if you are the only, say that you are an American who moves abroad and you are the only American in your class of Australian students, you are much more likely to feel like an imposter because you are made to feel different. And that may be explicit, look at the American, or it might be implicit, where people just stop and say to you like, oh, this word that I said means this, right? You're constantly reminded that you're different. Mm-hmm. And the phenomenon, the research on it started in the late 70s, early 80s on Wall Street, which is the financial capital of the US, where they had a few women who were working in these big deal firms. And these women were successful and well-liked, but they were miserable and they were anxious and they would pack their offices up every Friday, convinced they were about to be fired because they were a half dozen women and several hundred men. Yeah. And they were so aware of that difference that they felt like imposters. So for gifted kids who are so aware of their difference, I'm not like other 6-year-olds because I can do multivariate calculus, right? And the other 6-year-olds are playing Pokemon. That feeling can manifest as imposter syndrome. Like, I don't belong here. There's a reason that I'm not like everybody else. So they're going to find me out and they're going to kick me out of the school.
And am I right in saying that there's also a, what's the word I'm looking for? Tendency or prevalence amongst highly intelligent people in terms of imposter syndrome? Is that correct?
For sure. There's actually even sort of two levels of answer to that question, right?
Yeah.
The first part is the more intelligent you are, the more aware you are of both what you know, but more importantly, what you don't know, right? So when I sat down to write my dissertation on giftedness, my original draft was 250 pages. And my advisor looked at it and said, this is a book. This isn't a dissertation. Dissertations are 70 pages. This is, stop this. But I was like, I have to know everything, right?
Yeah.
I had 20 different citations on overexcitabilities, and overexcitabilities had nothing to do with what I wrote. It's that I know and I need to know, so I have to learn. But every time I learn, I have to learn another thing. And I can sense the people out there in podcast land nodding, right? Like,
yeah,
yes,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Harold, go to the store and buy a bottle of wine. Okay, let's see. What kinds of wines are there? What kinds of vineyards are there? Where do the grapes come from? How much does wine cost? I mean, like, are there good grapes? Are there bad grapes? And like, you find like Harold in
there's so many factors. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Many factors. And the more cognitively complex you are, the more you're able to engage in and appreciate the complexity of things, that can grind you to a halt and can also lead to imposter syndrome. Because it's this, if someone asks you, like, what do you do? Right?
Oh, I hate that question.
I'm a psychologist. That's a simple answer.
Yeah.
The complex answer that makes you more likely to feel like an imposter is I do 93 things. I have this training or lack of training. This was my journey. And And it's the sort of thing that it sets you up to be made to feel different, right? And it's a major systemic factor in creating imposter syndrome. The other aspect of really smart people in imposter syndrome is a subset phenomenon called the theory of relativity syndrome. So the idea here is that Albert Einstein, right, theory of relativity, he spent the last half of his career at Princeton University here in the United States. And while he was there, he wrote 2 academic papers. One clarifying a small point on E equals MC squared, and the other apologizing for not being able to write the grand unified theory, which was supposed to be his 3rd great thing he did. Because Einstein said, he's like, when you've changed the world twice, all other work seems like it doesn't matter. And that's just such a powerful moment, because our kids are capable of great work. They are capable of paradigm shifting work that blows minds, work that changes the game. But nobody does work like that all the time. That's not possible, right? And if every time you recorded a podcast, it had to be the best podcast ever of all time, you'd burn yourself out.
Yeah,
right? It's not possible. Like,
I would get stuck procrastinating.
You would, right? You over prepare, which is one aspect of imposter syndrome, or you'd put it off. And that's the other aspect, right? It's this, like, whatever I can do to keep myself from actually doing the thing. Because once I do the thing, I might find out it's not as good as I want it to be.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a part of the reason Einstein only wrote 2 papers. It's not like he stared at the wall for 10 years. He just got stuck.
Yeah.
And so I tell the kids I work with, good can be the enemy of great. That's a true thing, right? But great can be the enemy of done. And sometimes we need to just get things done.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, and so I feel like that really ties into those tendencies around perfectionism, which is obviously very strong within the kind of gifted context as well. So I'm gonna have to digest that for a second. That's the first time I've heard that one about Albert Einstein. So
yeah,
that's cool. And I totally get that. And I think where I have come across a similar idea is, I think sometimes an expectation amongst parents of gifted children that the gifted child, because they're gifted, therefore they always have to be, excelling kind of exponentially. There always have to be in that upward trajectory, when the truth is we all need to cruise sometimes and plateau. And that's important for consolidation and integrating what we've just had a leap on. And that idea of, we can't be great all of the time. We do need that sort of time out just to consolidate and be normal humans and do the life thing for a bit. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so what are the possible effects of imposter syndrome on someone? What might someone be experiencing in the way that it impacts their life?
So this is it's best summed up by saying stressed out. It's a highly stressful thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're aware of what you need to do.
Yeah.
And you are paralyzed by 2 competing forces. The I'm not ready yet, I need to do more. And the oh my God, this feeling is so bad, I want to run the opposite direction from it. So you're both over preparing and avoiding. So it's like, hey, that's both terrible. And if the stars align, you're actually able to do the work, you're sort of sitting there thinking, well, this isn't good enough. Like, what if this paper's already written? What if somebody's already done this dance move? What if there's a better soccer player out there than me that I just don't know about yet? And part of untangling imposter syndrome is acknowledging that those things may be true, and we have to do it anyway. And on the chances that they're not true, you get to do it anyway. Right? I'm not going to say that my dissertation on giftedness changed the world, because it didn't. Right? It's an above average dissertation. It's pretty good, right? And that's okay, right? It's a hell of a lot better than the 250-page monstrosity I dropped on my advisor's desk. Just like if you and I decided to rehearse this podcast forever until it was perfect, it would lose something, right? It would lose that sort of like organic, you and I just banging ideas back and forth together. But also, you and I would be like just burn the rest of our days. And it's 8:30 here on the East Coast of the United States, and I got to go to bed at some point. So,
Yeah.
right, like, so it's it's this really stressful thing where you sort of hit on all sides from like, I'm not good enough, I'm not ready yet, I can't do this. While I'm doing it, it's stressful. And you can imagine how that's going to manifest in a person of like just sort of this rigid, like frozen in fear sort of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that completely resonates with me, definitely. And I know from parents I talk to that, well, I'm getting that sense that when parents talk a lot about perfectionism, maybe actually what is in the mix there is also a lot of imposter syndrome going on with their kids. And I'm sure that people are listening, especially adult listeners like ourselves, thinking, yeah, imposter syndrome, that's definitely something that I've experienced. And I know even when I first started doing the podcast and the whole gifted thing, it was very much like, well, who am I to do this? Do you know? But thankfully, I learned earlier in my career in politics that actually, like, the world gets run by the people who turn up. And who am I? I'm the person who turned up, do you know? Like, and it doesn't mean that most days I'm still kind of like, oh, what am I doing? But I'm painting it done. I'm just going for done rather than perfect. As you will know from our earlier conversation about the questions that I did not send in advance, but it's just kind of like, no, I just got to get it done rather than procrastinate, which is a big thing for me. So I just can put my hand certainly on my heart and say that, it's something that I struggle with on a regular basis. But I get the sense that it's not gender specific. We did talk about sort of women on Wall Street initially, but men, women, or wherever you're identifying in terms of gender, cultural, age, like I'm getting the sense that it's open slather. Anyone can experience this.
There was actually a beautiful piece written by an Aboriginal researcher at the University of Perth in West Australia about their experiences of imposter syndrome as a researcher, as an academic, right? And like, do I belong here? Am I some token hire? No, I was trained at Oxford. I have the degrees. I'm good at this, but also like, do I belong here? And it was, and that's in that particular situation where the differences are very overt, right? You might find a deeper, more intransigent sense of imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. And then you also might get some of the stereotype, threat, bias stuff that loads in from the outside, right? Mostly imposter syndrome is an internal thing. Yeah. But and one of the things you spoke to before, which I think is really important to think about as you try to untangle your own relationship with imposter syndrome, we tend to look up when we compare ourselves to others, right? So it's like, how many podcasts are out there? Well, and where are my numbers on podcasts vis-a-vis whoever else's podcast, right? Or if you're a scientist, you tend to look at the most successful scientists. If you're a mathematician, who won the Fields Medal? And in doing so, we lose looking at people who are our peers, people who are at our level, and we don't look at the people who have done less than us, including those of us who have done. How many moms are out there? How many moms of gifted kids are out there? How many of them actually started a podcast, let alone an international one, right? Listen, you get big deal people from here in the States and me. So, but that's, that's the thing, right? Like, doing the thing is the biggest antidote to imposter syndrome, right? Because imposter syndrome is anxiety, and anxiety just wants us to stand still. Anxiety wants us to do nothing. Yeah. Committed action is this, hey, you know what? that loud voice in my head is screaming, you're an imposter, you're an imposter, you're an imposter. But you know what? I put some paint on a canvas today. I ran today. I practiced my oboe today. I surfed today. I filled out my online application for uni today. I did those things today. It doesn't untangle, it doesn't make imposter syndrome go away. But every time you take a concrete action, its grip on you gets a little bit less. And that's a very cool thing.
That is a very cool thing. So for anyone out there listening, thinking, right, I really need to get a handle on this, the best thing they can do is just take baby steps. Just take some kind of action, despite the kind of voices trying to keep us safe. Because I think in as much as those voices, maybe anxiety ridden and maybe preventing us moving forward, in a way, they're also trying to keep us safe and small and in that one spot. And it's almost like, whether it's a good place or not, it's what you know, and it's therefore a safe place. And so breaking out of that can be scary, definitely. But by taking those baby steps, we can start to move forward and out of that. And I'm guessing it's like anything, it's a muscle. We've just got to keep doing it, keep practicing it, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. And making sure that you're moving forward in ways that actually move you forward, right? Because, if you are, for instance, if you're trying to write, you actually have to write, not edit the stuff you've already written. And I'm calling a lot of people out, including myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, well, I can't write. I have to make sure the things I've like, and that's the thing. It's almost like you should save and hide everything you write and just start from a fresh page every day, right? And it's the same way if you are trying to do art. It's the same thing if you are trying to practice your musical instrument or play field hockey or whatever it is you're going to do, because it's so easy to hide in the repetitive actions that feel safe, that we feel like we have gained mastery over. But and so then you can lie to yourself and say, well, I'm doing stuff. Yes. I read 32 articles today. There are 32 more than I needed, but I read them, and therefore I know things, right? And it's the sort of thing that I tell the kids I work with, I would rather you vomit out 10 pages of absolute garbage about the thing you read, and then we'll edit it and we'll fix it together, than you deciding that you need to read the complete works of Herman Melville before you even put pen to paper. And the kids will say, but how do I manage my anxiety around that? It's like, you grit your teeth and you climb the 2-minute mountain. Because when we start something new, when we try to do a committed action, our anxiety is highest for 90 seconds. When we start a thing, there's 90 seconds of very intense anxiety. And if you can survive that 90 seconds, you're going to be okay. But you got to climb the 2-minute mountain. That's what it is. It's this, like, you're sitting down and you pull out your manuscript and you're writing some words, and then you start to feel anxious and you go, well, maybe I'll just go back and I'll make sure everything. And then you just say, okay, this is my 2-minute mountain. I have to keep writing for 2 minutes, and then that feeling is going to go away. And I'm just going to type away. And then, like, you look up and 2 minutes have passed and you're like, okay, I survived that. I can keep going. That's right. That's such and making yourself aware of that process, the physiological response to anxiety going down. Making yourself aware of that is actually another part of curing this, because, I've given, I don't know, about 100 talks on giftedness, and it's my favorite part of my job. And every single time I do, I have this rule of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm going to log on and there's going to be nobody there, and just a sign on the Zoom that says, we figured out that you're a fraud, get out of here. And I'm like, they finally caught me. I've done so well. And that hasn't happened yet. And knock wood that it's never going to happen. I don't think it's going to. Every time I start talking, every time I get into the flow, about halfway through, I sort of take a moment, I reflect, like, okay, I'm doing a pretty good job at this, right? I'm in the moment, I'm doing the thing. And in those moments where I reflect, my imposter syndrome is silent because it's not real.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a quote for today. It's not
Right?
real. Yeah,
It's not real.
it's not real. So it's not real. And we just got to do the thing for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Feel the feels, grit for 2 minutes, get over the hump. Yeah, just proper grit, 2 minutes. And then that's the hard bit. I like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not sure where to go next with this.
So I was talking about this once, and I was at a supporting the emotional needs of the gifted mini conference out in Seattle, Washington, in the US. And Mike Postma, our major domo of Sang, had asked me, "Can you do something on imposter syndrome?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that. Sure. I suffer from it. I'm not just an expert, I'm also a member, right?" So I put a talk together, and I was ready to go. And of course, the room is filled because a lot of people want to learn about imposter syndrome. It's of all the talks I give, it's the one that gets the biggest emotional response, because everyone is sitting there thinking, I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only imposter.
Yeah.
It's like, but no, we are all dealing with this, right? I mean, come on. And so I always tell people, like, if this describes you, raise your hand. And everyone like awkwardly looks around the room as everyone's hands are raised.
Yeah.
We're going through this, and Susan Daniels, right, who is a giant in our field and one of the kindest and sweetest humans I've ever had the good pleasure of meeting, is sitting in the front row, right, 8 feet from me. And at one point, she looks at me and she goes, "Oh my God, that's so me."
Oh, wow.
And I had to laugh. I was like, "You're Susan Daniels."
Yeah.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
You don't have imposter syndrome. You're Susan Daniels. And in doing so, proving my point. Right. That it's like that, that the giants of our fields, our heroes, our legends feel that way. I mean, Gordon Ramsay, the chef, has spoken at length about imposter syndrome because he grew up very poor, growing up not eating 5-star Michelin meals, right? Growing up eating beans on toast. And he's like, I spent the first 10 years of my career waiting for someone to say, you're just a kid from Glasgow who doesn't belong in a French kitchen. And it's this idea, like, not only does it sort of co-occur with intelligence, but it also co-occurs with success and achievement. The higher we climb, the higher we have to fall. And our anxiety is very aware of that, right? So it's like, hey, you fooled everybody. Like, there you are. You think you're the CEO of this company, but you're actually a fraud. And it's not helping us. It's not telling us the truth, but it's loud and it's constant and it's in our head, right? So that is part of this process. Part of the reason we're having this podcast and that you're listening to it is that the next time these feelings show up, you can name this as imposter syndrome and say, like, hey, this is just my imposter syndrome talking. If I fail out in the world will do a very good job of letting me know, right? If you write a book and you submit it to a publisher and they go, this is the worst thing I've ever read. You tried to write Harry Potter and you called it Parry Hotter, and that's just not even fair. Come on, get out of here with this mess. Trust me, the world will fail you on its terms. Don't do the work for him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Ask the person out on a date. Try out for the soccer team. Apply to uni. Apply to graduate school. Write the book. Host the podcast. Right?
Get it done.
Get it done. Right?
Good is done. Absolutely.
Good is done. Right?
Good is done. Yeah. I love that. And what a great note to kind of wrap up on. So imposter syndrome, like, everyone's feeling it.
Everyone's feeling it.
Everyone's feeling it. It's okay. We can talk about this stuff. And I think the more we do kind of talk about it and share it, and that sense of we can all be a bit vulnerable. We're all just human doing the life thing. Some days we do that better than others, but we still got to get through it. And yeah, I think that's the thing for me. We're all just kind of humans having the human kind of experiment, as they say, and doing the best that we can. So I like that we've left everyone with a few tools, a few strategies there. Get over the first 2 minutes, just grit and do it. Take those baby steps, exercise that muscle around overcoming the imposter syndrome, and say it out loud. I do that a lot with my kids as well. Normally it's, mummy's tired and needs help, but now I can say mummy's feeling imposter syndrome. Give me a hug,
give me something, right? And that's exactly it. There's a great quote about this, that who has imposter syndrome?
Everyone.
All the smart, successful people that you think have their shit together.
Yes. Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, I think you nailed it there, because I think that may have been a comment that I said earlier about not having
around.
I know you did a great wrap around there, but it's like, I've always felt like people look at me like I've kind of got my shit together, which is nice to think that people think that of me, but I'm just going, I'm doing this day by day. A lot of it I'm making up as I go along, and just in good grace, doing the best that I can, and being a bit brave in terms of saying what I don't know and going after those things.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one thing I am good at. But let's face it, no one has their shit together. We're all just on this spectrum of getting through life, and that's okay. I think that's what makes it interesting.
It does. I mean, life without challenge would be boring, and this is an internal challenge that we get to wrestle with. And hopefully, now that you've listened to this podcast, you understand yourself a little bit better, and you can give yourself a little bit more grace and say, I don't have to know everything. My contributions have value because I showed up today, because I had an interest in this and I raised my hand or went to a conference or put some words on a paper or some paint on a canvas, because the doers get things done, and those contributions have value, they have meaning, and they are proof you are not an imposter, regardless of what your brain tells you, right? Because I'm saying this to you out loud, universe. I'm loudly shouting to you that you belong here. The things you are doing are great, and the doubt you feel doesn't undo any of the wonderful things you are doing or have already done.
Wonderful words to end the podcast on. Thank you so much. And thank you for your very kind words about the podcast as well, and for being absolutely one of our favorite guests and an excellent international speaker on giftedness. Can I just say, doing it great. And thank you for everyone that was listening. I'm sure you've probably got as much out of this conversation as I have today. And it's given you some strategies and some things to think about. And we look forward to talking to you again, Dr. Matt. And thank you. Imposter syndrome. Right. We're all going to go out and kick its butt.
Kick its butt, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it.
Thank you so much for being here. And we'll let you go to bed now.
Good night.
If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.